Time for another Whiteman lecture. Seems like the years fly by. This is the 22nd Whiteman lecture. And if we look on the back of the program, there's some pretty impressive names there. And Mary, I should warn you, if you go through this list, a lot of those names are trustees of the college. Some of them were trustees of the college before they gave the speech, but a lot of them became trustees of the college after they gave the speech. So if someone gives you a call in a couple days or a couple months, you may want to just let the phone ring. As you know, each year the Whiteman Lecture is introduced by one of our students, and we didn't have to look hard to find one who would be a great match for this year's speaker. But before I introduce Andrew Shakalis, I want to make two other introductions. I think there's some Whitemans in the audience, right? Where are our Whitemans? Why don't we, Ralph and Dick, why don't you stand up and be recognized? Ralph and Dick are two of the sons of Wendell Whiteman, Monmouth College class of 1927, and this lecture series is named in honor of Wendell. Like their father, they both attended Monmouth College. Ralph Whiteman was a 1952 graduate, and he succeeded Wendell as president and CEO of Security Savings Bank here in Monmouth, and he also has served 24 years on the Monmouth College Board of Trustees. Dick Whiteman, who will be celebrating his 50th college reunion this spring, and also had a successful career in banking, has traveled all the way from his home in Tennessee to be with us today. So Ralph and Dick, thanks for being with us today, and thanks for making this lecture series possible. It's really one of the highlights of our year. As I mentioned, Andrew is a very appropriate choice to introduce our lecture. He is not only an honors student majoring in business, but he also is president of the college's Disney Club and has an intense interest in all things Disney. How intense, you might ask? Andrew has visited Disney World, well, how many times would you think? 87 times. And he is planning to spend next summer in Disney's college program, which he hopes will be the first step of many for him up the Disney corporate ladder. In the tradition of Monmouth College's well-rounded students, Andrew has other academic and extracurricular interests. He has added a second major in history and is a member of the Fighting Scots talented men's tennis team. And indeed, they're talented this year. I think I've been told that there's a quotation from Mary Poppins that describes his career here. And I have to say I'm told because I've been to Disney 87 times fewer than you have. According to Mary Poppins, we should open different doors. You may find a you there that you never knew was yours. Anything can happen. Here to introduce our 2014 Whiteman Lecture is Andrew Shakalis.
Hello? Hi. Okay, there we go. Put that right there. Perfect. All right. Thank you, President Ditzer. I am honored to be here, and I am just thrilled to give such a wonderful introduction to such a prestigious person. As the President mentioned, I like Disney. I have strong ties to the Disney Company, and I have felt a passion towards the Disney Company for years. One of the things that people think when they think about Disney is Mickey Mouse ears or Tinkerbell's pixie dust or Cinderella's castle. But when you think about it, Disney means big business. When you look at the Disney World entertainment, especially. And so in the spirit of that business, we look at television programming. Please indulge me for just a moment. Which of the following facts of our wonderful Whiteman lecturer are true? A, during her time at the Walt Disney World Company, she helped produce the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game show. B, she knows much more about Regis Philbin than any other average American I know, and has been the executive producer for both Regis with Kathy Lee and then also Regis and Kelly. C, She's the executive director for marketing and programming at CBS and has shared multiple Emmy Awards over the last 3 decades in the television business. D, she's got her start right here in Monmouth, Illinois. I hope you guys don't need to survey the audience and or call a friend. The final answer is all of the above. I hope you don't. Today our speaker is the Executive Vice President of the Cedar Bay Entertainment in her own company's Titanic Attractions in Branson, Missouri, and also Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Please join me in giving a welcome home welcome to our 2014 Wendell Whiteman Memorial Lecturer, Mary Kellogg.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank everybody in the Whiteman family for inviting me and Dr. Drexel and the entire college community. You know, we're going to go down a journey. And how in the world did my life change with one letter? Well, I'm going to share that story with you, but we're going to take it a little bit later. I want to figure out first, how in the world did we get involved in Titanic? Well, John was a television producer and I was a television producer. And our worlds collided at CBS. He formed his own production company, and I stayed with CBS for 10 years and became an executive over all television and marketing for the CBS studios. At that point, John left and started his own production company and did lots of television productions. He traveled all over the world. In fact, I'm often say the reason our marriage lasted is because we've only been together half of our time. So he did Lost City of Atlantis, he's been in Hitler's bunkers, he's been in the Vatican, he's been all over. But let's go back to how in the world did all of this get started? Well, we looked at John, and he did his television show, and Titanic was found in 1985. You see, nobody could find her because technology hadn't reached a level in which you could go 12,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. And finally, as they were scanning on the last day of their venture, they found Titanic. And the second year, in 1987, so in 85 she was found, in 87, he decided, I think we'll go to the Titanic and we'll do the first television shows. His partner said, you gotta be crazy. They put an expedition together. It cost $6 million, and they were at sea for 44 days, and they did 32 dives to the Titanic. So why don't we take a look at that expedition before we continue on this journey.
When
So John goes around the world, and he shows the 1,800 items. And the first place he takes it to is Memphis, Tennessee, where in 6 months, 800,000 people show up to look at the artifacts. It's the first time in the world anybody's ever seen these artifacts. He then takes it down to St. Petersburg, and from there it travels all over the United States. It then goes to Europe. And the business model really does not work at that point, because once they've traveled, it's what do you do with them? So we come to the part where I intervene, where I receive a letter. I'm working, I've left CBS, and I had the privilege of Michael Eisner calling me and asking me to work with him at his company. And I had the privilege of working with Michael Eisner, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Rich Frank, and Frank Wells before he passed away. And this small team came together because, you see, Disney was really in trouble. It was a sleeping giant, I always say. And when we went there, we sat around the table and we said, how are we going to revitalize this company? Well, the first thing we decided in television was that we needed some new product. And so when I was at CBS, we had tried to get Regis to move from ABC over to CBS, and we couldn't. So when we went to Disney, I called him up and his agent and everything and said, we'd love to have you as part of our family at Disney and put you on national television. And we put Kathy Lee with him. And as the executive over that show, you know, I was with him for over 20 years besides all the other shows that I was doing. But during the first year, it was quite a struggle to get that show. And I can remember sitting in a meeting with all the sales guys, and Rich and Michael are there. And the sales guys are telling me what's wrong with the show. And I just listen. Because, see, we didn't have any ratings. And at the end of it, Rich looked at me and he said, what do you think, Mary? And I said, they're bigger than talk show people, but I need another year. And I know I can make this show work. And to Michael's credit and Rich's credit, he looked at all of them and he said, your sales guys, your job is to sell. She'll fix the show. And the rest became history. We identified who our market was, and we went heavily after that. But during the course of that, we started to take the show out on the road. And as you take the show out on the road, it is able to introduce you to potentially new viewers. So one day, and I can remember it was in October, I received a letter from a little tiny community in the Ozarks called Branson, Missouri. And they asked if I would bring the show to Branson. And we've received so many letters from so many community leaders and towns. I just kind of put it in my pile because we were in November rating period. In January, we went to what we call the television convention, and at the convention, you're selling all your shows. So we had lots of shows to sell, and we're renewing the Regis and Kathy Lee show. And at that show, when we finished, I looked at Michael Gelman and I said, there's this town called Branson, Missouri, and we're in Houston at the convention. Why don't we go see what this town is all about? So I looked at John, because he was selling his shows also. And so I looked at John and said, why don't you come with us? So we went to Branson, Missouri. And during the course of talking to all the community leaders, which would be like community leaders here, they had the passion for their town. And as I sat and listened to them, I said to Michael when we got back, and I went to the studio, and I said, I think we need to take this show to the heart of America. We've been on the coast, and we all fly over it, but in the middle is really the heart of what America is all about, and I think we need to go there. Now, it takes about 6 months to put a show together, let alone maybe a year, and it costs about $800,000 to move that show. So we went to Branson, Missouri the following year, and we had 25,000 people show up, and we did 4 shows. But it put us back on the map with Middle America, because it wasn't just about Branson. It was about the 12 communities around Branson. So during that time, John decided, you know, I have to find a permanent location for these museums. And based on that letter, And based on going to Branson, Missouri, because I would have never thought to go to Branson, Missouri. In fact, when I got the letter, I'm a Chicago, Monmouth, Chicago, New York, LA girl, and I go, where is Branson, Missouri? And if somebody would have told me I was going to be living in Branson, Missouri about 10 years later, I would have said, you're out of your mind. So, cut to, John decides after he starts talking to the community and the business people there, he's going to build a permanent. But I'm still busy doing my thing, and he's doing his thing. And he identified the property he wanted, because you'll learn in this business it's about location. And 10 years later, he waited for that property. And he called me one day, and he said, I'm going to buy that property in Branson, Missouri, and I'm going to build a permanent museum. Now, the worlds collide at that point with my career, because I'd been with Disney for 20 years. Michael had left, and as we say in the business, I was part of his team, and I was the last of his team to be with the Disney organization. You got to know when it's time to move. And I felt Bob Iger was coming in, and I adore Bob, and I think he's done a fantastic job with Disney. But it was time for another team to come in and take it to another level. We had built the foundation. So I came home one day, and I said, John, I have an idea. I think I'm going to leave Disney. And the good news is we'll be able to spend Christmas together for the first time. But I don't have a job, so I think I want to work with you, and let's build this company together. But there's a stipulation that has to work for me, and that is everybody reports to me, and I'll report to you, because you got to have one big boss. You can't have two. So we agreed on that, and we structured the company so that everybody reports to me and I report to John. Because you see, when anything goes wrong, you got to send somebody to somebody. So I think it should be John. So that's how we built the structure of the company, and that's how we built the first one with Branson being the first place. And we asked the question, why did a permanent? It was a financial decision. Once you have them out on display, now that doesn't mean 10 years from now we can't take them back out again. But we needed to identify a location, and John figured and did a feasibility study, and that's where he decided that it should be Branson. But then you have to figure out, well, who is your customer? Who in the world would come Titanic all the time? And my feeling was that everybody had focused too much on the ship, and that really the heart and soul of Titanic is her passengers. So it took us 14 months to build Titanic. And during that time, in my head, I'm thinking, well, I've never built anything before, but the executive producer is my designer, and the director is my construction guy, and I put it all in television terms, and that's how long it takes to do a television show, to develop it. 14 months. And I can remember having a hard hat on, and I can be honest with you and tell you that we were starting to run out of money. And I can remember running into my construction guy, and we had about 4 more weeks left to build it. And I can remember looking at him and saying, we are opening this on March. I don't care where we are in construction. We need to get some money back into this company. And so we opened it on time in March of 2006. So we were all excited about how well it went. And of course, this is when you bring your IOUs in. And I called Regis and said, I think I want you there for the christening. And to his credit, he recognized I had worked for him for 20 years. It was now time for him to say, pay me back. So he came down. He was gracious enough. Joy and them came down, and I had a whole presentation that he did. We had the captain on the top of the ship. And, you know, White Star Line never christened her ship. But through the Titanic Historical Society, everybody agreed that it was okay that we christened our ship. So we did the christening of the ship, and Regis was there. Why do you bring Regis? Because he creates the publicity for you to let the world know in that area that we had Titanic. So how do you create a Titanic experience? Well, again, I'll go back It was about the passengers, and it was about their stories. So the big debate was, well, how is that experience going to be within the ship? And my feeling was that once you leave behind scenes, you're now in 1912. And how do you accomplish that with your crew? So yes, I have an officer's uniform on, and yes, sometimes I do work the lines, and sometimes I am out there listening to my crew. But it's to listen to them to find out what we should do within the ship. What works, what doesn't work. Oh yes, I've been asked if I'm an airline pilot. And the other day I was asked, well, are you in the Navy? So lots of times, but I will tell you, every salesperson, when they go on a call, has an officer's uniform on. And each one of them comes back with the same if they're new. Wow, there's such a dignity and respect that Titanic is in the room. So we train all of our crew members. They go through what we call a Titanic University. And during that university study, which is about 10 days, not 6 months, 10 days, and they are shadowed, and they're all either first-class maids or officers. And now we've taken them to another level, and they now become cast members and portray certain passengers aboard this ship. So at the end of the day, I said to John, it really isn't about the artifacts. Yes, they validate who we are, but at the end of the day, that's not what they're writing us. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about their experience and how well that experience is handled, which is through the crew. So then we go into the crew. That's one of our ships on the grand staircase. We actually built the grand staircase. It is to actual size, as it was on the Titanic. One of the questions we get asked all the time is, well, it seems so much smaller than in the movie. Well, you see, Jim Cameron had to make that grand staircase much wider and much taller because we're all much wider and taller than our predecessors in 1912. But ours is the actual size. If he had done it this actual size, the grand staircase would have looked very small in the movie. So we take a look, and we do a whole training. We do coaching, we do development of our cast. And I'm really proud to say that we have 14 crew members that have been with us in Branson for 9 years. And in a tourist industry, that is very hard to get because there's lots of travel, moving from one job to another a lot in the tourist business. I know Disney has it too. So let's take a look at what the crew has. What comes first? How many of you would say guests come first? Employees come first. You see, if your professor is happy, then as a student, you're happy. As a guest, if your employee is happy and has been trained and educated, then the guest experience is a happy one. But it doesn't stop with just the university. It continues on every day. I'm always reminding our management team, that's the reason we call you management, is because it's a continuation of everything we teach every day. I wouldn't need managers if everybody did everything perfect, but that is part of the process of training our crew. So let's take a look.
What makes the Titanic Museum attraction the #1 attraction in Branson and Pigeon Forge? You're looking at them, the crew. From the moment you arrive and receive your boarding pass of an actual Titanic passenger or crew member, to your last stop in the memorial room, our crew is with you every step of the way. We're here to celebrate the ship and her passengers and crew, and to assist you on your self-guided, interactive journey through Titanic. Take your turn at steering the ship by grasping the wheel on the captain's bridge. Tap out your very own SOS on the ship's wireless. Feel the heat as you shovel coal, or touch the chill of an iceberg. You can even imagine that cold, dark night as you sit in an actual-sized lifeboat and hear stories told by real survivors. Step back in time and stroll decks and galleries as you marvel at more than 400 artifacts, worth over $4.5 million. And now, for the first time in the world, you can walk up the $1 million handcrafted Grand Staircase. It's an experience for the whole family. Test your balance on the sloping decks. And test your knowledge of one of the most dramatic stories ever told with trivia designed for kids or adults. A crew member will be nearby to answer any questions you might have. At the end of your journey, step into the memorial room with 2,208 names to learn the fate of your passenger or crew member.
If you have not experienced the Titanic Museum attraction yet, you must come aboard. I'll be right here to greet you.
So, education, training, set expectation levels for your employees. We've had so many people that we started with in Branson who didn't know specifically what their jobs were, but we set the expectation levels. You see, my philosophy is just like a television show, it must be perfect. And oftentimes people ask me, don't you miss television? Well, I'd always say, no, the platform is different, but the concept is exactly the same. When I had a 9 o'clock show or whatever time the show was, it had to be perfect. When we open the museum, it has to be perfect. You see, it might be the first time that a guest has ever seen this. So the speech must feel exactly like the first time you ever said it. And in the retail shop, when they ask you the same question 1,564 times where the bathroom is, you say, right this way. So, training is very important as well as expectation levels. How do you create ownership of your business? Well, do you share numbers or don't? And because I came from Disney, we never shared numbers. We never told anybody even how much our budgets were for the shows. So when we built this company, my feeling was, I'm not sharing numbers. I don't want anybody to know whether we had a good day or a bad day. And then one day I woke up and I thought, why am I keeping these numbers away from everybody? After all, they're working hard. Why shouldn't they suffer like I do? So I decided one day at our 8:30 staff meeting every day, which is with all the crew, and the objective for that is to set the tone for the day. Do we have any coaches coming in, any special groups coming in, any special birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, vow renewals? So the crew knows what's going on. I decided we should share the numbers. So every morning we say how many came in for the day, how many per cap, how much we made in the retail shop, because you see, I think that is a business too, and we've created that model as a business, and the per cap, and then you have your audio sales. And I have heard the crew, when we didn't make our per cap, turn around and boo. I didn't have to do that because they all had ownership. I've also heard the morning crew leave and the afternoon crew take over, and I've heard them on their wireless mics say, we're off duty now, you afternoon crew, we got that audio up at 70%, don't let it go down. They monitor themselves. So as we move forward, and at the end of the year, did you do well or not? They're all part of the process. It isn't a surprise. And I can remember, we always give out bonuses to all of our employees, and I can remember one year, John and I, this was in Branson before we built Pigeon Forge. It was about our 5th year, and it was not an exceptional year. And we decided that we just couldn't give bonuses that year. And I felt terrible. And I had the entire crew come to me and say, don't worry, Mary, we're fine. We just like working here. Now, you can't have that today with so many employees, but that's how much we care about our employees. And why did that happen? Because we communicated all year long our process, our frustrations. Just last week in Branson, in Pigeon Forge, it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I happened to go down to the galley, and some of them were on break, and they said, "Oh, Mary, did you hear? Did you see the numbers? We're already over 1,000. So there, they take an ownership and excitement about whatever you're doing as a company. Secret shopping. That is an important step in a business. Whether you have the president coming in and talking to the professors or observing, it's an important part. And I'll tell you a story that happened. We secret shopped the phone room. And the phone room takes all the reservations, and they're rehearsed all the time on how to handle our guests who call in, whichever ship they're making their reservations for. And this one secret shopper indicated she had 2 children, one 10, one 6 years old. And as she went through the process and she's giving me the report, she said, "He did perfect. I mean, he said everything correctly. He was enthusiastic. He knew how to close." And at the very end, I said to him, "Do you really think a 6-year-old will have a good time and will enjoy the museum?" There was a slight pause. And he said, "Probably not. That's my business, is children." So she brought the report in, and as leadership, she used this example in a leadership program she did the other day. She knew the room and said to these people, "How do you think Mary reacted to that?" And they all went, "She fired him." No, my answer was, "We didn't do our jobs." I met with the head of the department and I said, "Has he been over to the ship and spent a whole day and seen all these children that come in that want to see Titanic? Has he experienced that?" Well, he was supposed to, but somehow he didn't get over there. I said, "Well, then we need to get him over to the ship, and we need to have him observe. And the second day, put him in a uniform and have him see what these children experience. And I guarantee you he'll change his mind." And you'd think I had planned it, but that second day, a little boy came up to him and said, "I love the Titanic." When he got done and he went back to the office and he told all of his reservation folks the story, he said, "You know, I think I might even adopt a child now that I've been over there." So, part of the culture of your company is how you want to manage your people. So we get to strategy. Oh, I'm a big believer in this. My career was short-term thinking and long-term thinking. I always knew what I wanted, but I didn't know that other doors were going to open up. I didn't know television was going to open up. And when that door opened up and I had a chance to look inside of it, I loved television. I loved the producing. I loved the nurturing. I loved watching producers become better at their jobs and eventually executive producers. I loved the whole process. Yeah, do you ever go into a television show thinking you're going to do a bad show? Never. Sometimes the chemistry between the executive producer and the on-air talent and the producing team just doesn't work. And sometimes I was handed a show, and there was no way I knew that show was going to work, but I never let anybody know. And my whole attitude was, I have to figure out how to make it work. But in my heart, I knew it wasn't. You know, when Jimmy Kimmel first started, they were having lots of trouble with Jimmy. And it takes time for television shows to catch on. And now the medium has changed so drastically. But they called me and said, "Can you come over and help the Jimmy Kimmel show?" And I said, "You need somebody," and this was 10 years ago, "you need somebody that's in their early 30s to nurture that show and work with this younger crowd. I'm not the guy to do that." I worked with Keenen Ivory Wayne trying to make that show work. And I learned a lot from working with Keenen Ivory Wayne. Culture of your company. Leadership. Management. We don't call our team management. We call them coaches. And every day I talk to my vice president of operations of both ships at the end of the day. I tend to do all my calls at the end of the day because we're all so busy and catch up. And I'm always amazed how she uses that word. We're coaching this particular manager in a better way. We have an issue with this manager, but we're going to coach them to handle it much better the next time. You know, when you're building a foundation of a company, the first thing you have to have is trust. In a college, you have to have trust. You have to believe that these people will protect you so that when you have conflict, it's about the conflict and not about the personalities. So within the company, I've done interventions within our own company where I've called them all in and talked to them about the pyramid. Because if you have trust, you can create the conflict and you won't take it personally. It's about the problem, which creates challenges, which creates sales opportunities. Most people, it's sales and trust is at the top. It should be the other way around. Building experience, we've talked about that a little bit, for your guests and for your employees. At Titanic, we do Backstage Magic. And Backstage Magic at the Titanic is a little bit a takeoff of what Disney does, but I've taken it to one step further. Each month, 3 employees are pulled into the office with the general manager. And when they are told that it's Backstage Magic Day, their job is to share with their fellow crew members who they would nominate that did a job beyond the call of what their regular job is, which requires them to look outside of their own team. They have to look outside because they can never nominate somebody within their own team. So once they decide, and sometimes I step into that room because I just like to hear what the crews are saying about each other. They say they get a certificate, $50 I believe it is, and they get to give it to the employee. So when they walk out of that room, they go to the employee and they say, you were picked for Backstage Magic, and I picked you, and this is why I picked you. And I have seen many tears shed because an employee now did a random act of kindness to his fellow employee. And we've been doing this for about 6 years now, and it has been a successful program. Position statement with our guests and deliver the promise. I always say to sales, isn't it wonderful to work for a company where you as sales say this is what's going to be delivered, and operation actually delivers it? We had one time at the very beginning, group of students come in, and they were in the 3rd grade, and they kind of ran through the ship. And sales was mad at operations, and operations was mad, and I was getting both calls, and I said, let's just meet together, and we met together, and I listened to both sides. And at the end, I said to them, the problem isn't the kids. The problem is us. We are not in control. Sales promised this, and operation didn't control them. Because, as we all know, on a field day, a field trip day in school, in 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, yay, we get out of school. Oh, we're going to the Titanic. Oh, good, we get to learn something. Maybe. But we make sure that it is an experience for the students. And so we learn at that point how to control our guest experience. And we deliver on the promise. How do you create an image? My feeling was you needed an icon. You needed something the people could touch and feel. And so I created Janie, the first class maid, and she happened to be a terrific actress that was in shows in Paris and all over, and she happened to be in Branson now. And so I created the whole image campaign with her. And in fact, we would leave many places, and she'd say to me, you know, I'm really your Mickey Mouse of Titanic, aren't I? Core niche marketing, and just touch upon that just shortly. You have your busy, busy days, which we call Easter Sunday, which we can't build the church big enough for. And that's what you have to worry about with Titanic. We wanted to build big, but there's only so many days that it is full. So what do you do on those other days? So you have to, when you're looking at your marketing strategy and when are tourists really available, well, what do you do the other times? And that's when you start your niche marketing. 5% of our business in both Branson and Pigeon Forge is the coach business. But we spend a lot of time on coaches because there's a 6-week period in the fourth quarter where it's 80% of our business. So if we didn't have them, I wouldn't have any business during that period. So you have to identify when your niche marketing is going to fulfill your tourists. And tourists, as we all know, everybody comes in July and the first 2 weeks of August, and you don't have enough capacity to accommodate them all. The other thing we do is I did not want anybody could get in at any time. I wanted reservations. I wanted to allow only so many people per hour because there's nothing worse than going to someplace and you can't see anything because there's too many people. Now, I will tell you that the capacity level changes when you have wheelchairs and you have kids with strollers. And I'm telling you, these strollers today are like houses. So you create events. Other ways to promote your business. So we can all sit back and say, well, we don't have enough tourists, or can I create events that will create opportunities for them to visit? So we created the Princess Tea Party, which has been a huge success for us. Christmas, night at the museum, we do private dinners, and you must, as a business, give back to charity. And we do 2 major charity events at both locations to give back to the community. When we came into Branson, you listen to your community leaders and you identify what charities are important to the community. And you identify those charities. Because when you're new, everybody comes to you wanting money. Yes, I know. But everybody comes to you from the community and wants money. So what you have to do is you have to say, what is our focus so it's meaningful? And because John and I care so much about the youth of America today, we committed to Boys and Girls Club, and we committed to the hospital. So we do 2 charities. Now, do those change? Boys and Girls Club has never changed at both locations. We do change who our second venue is, charity. But we give out the museum, and all the money goes back to the charities. So change is good and change is necessary. How many times have you heard this statement? The marketplace is like a downward moving escalator, and if you stand still, you'll go down. But if you run up real hard, you can maybe get ahead. And that's what the level of tourism is today. It's very difficult. There's fewer dollars in discretionary funds today available. So you have your competition that you're fighting against all the time. But you gotta change. And if you indulge me for a moment, I was telling a story this morning. There was a clothing store here, The Model, and Bob and Dick McVeigh own it. And I adored these men. I used to just go hang out with Dick all the time. I'd go over to the store. And one day, they sold suits. And one day he came to my brother at Kellogg Printing, and he said, Bus, I'm going to close my business. People just don't buy suits. And if I had a word for Dick, I'd say, change is really hard. But you have to change for what your customer wants. And that meant maybe it wasn't suits. Maybe it was jeans and shirts and sweaters. I don't know. And I'm not being judgmental. But it's a good story for all of us because it affected a business here in town. Social media. Big. It's here to stay. 5 years ago, I identified that we needed one social media person. That's all she does, is social media. We have about 55,000 on our Facebook. And my niece, 2 years ago, she's the one that introduced me to Pinterest, Instagram, and all of that. And she spent this couple of weeks with us in the summer down in Tennessee, and she started talking about it. I said, well, tell me all about that. And from that point, we instantly got into all of that. So we have been in the social media world big time. But we have 2 concepts. We have one concept, which is to tell you what's going on at the museum and give you facts and information. But the other one is what I call the fake world of Titanic. And I'll give you an example. We have a young woman over at the ship, and every day her job is to tell you what's going on inside the ship. So she might send out a picture of a beautiful cake, and say the chef just made this cake for our crew today. He didn't really. But I've had people call and want to know how they get that cake. TripAdvisory. I always tell my staff, you know, at the very beginning, they all hated secret shopping. They said all they're doing is looking for what we're doing wrong. Yeah, that's right. That's what secret shopping is. That's what TripAdvisory is. I look at TripAdvisory, instead of waiting for a letter that's 3 months late from their last experience, look at it today and see what we need to fix. Maybe it's something we haven't thought about. Maybe it's something we need to react to. I look at it as a positive. Do I answer them? I answer all the negative ones. And always say, I appreciate your opinion. How do you extend the brand? Well, one of our areas in the retail shop, 25% of our business is from all the jewelry that we sell in the shop from the 1912 period. And my feeling was, I wonder if there's another outlet that we could sell this jewelry. So I started researching television, and I realized that jewelry television is in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I called up, asked for a meeting with the president and his team, and I went in and I told the story of Titanic. And he said, I want that jewelry. So every quarter for 6 hours, we sell jewelry on Jewelry Network. And in 6 hours, we can do over $350,000. Now, I don't get all of that. Television, JTV, retails, Titanic play. Well, I wrote a play, and we take that out on the road now, and we present it. And I always start the same way. Everybody knows the name Titanic, and everybody knows she struck an iceberg, and everybody knows we lost her. But there's so much more to her story. You see, there was 2,208 aboard this ship, and every one of them has a story. And today I present to you the 6 passenger stories that were aboard that ship. And so we tell those stories that were on the ship that night. So it's a way for us to tell the story of Titanic and promote our museum without the pitch. It's about the emotional attachment. So I always end with everything you do. It doesn't matter where you work or what you do. And I always say the same thing to the staff. I don't care if you're the senior vice president of operations. The guy who cleans the bathroom is just as important. Because there's nothing worse than doing an experience and ending on a bad experience. Each of our crew members, don't identify that you're with the Titanic if you're not going to be an ambassador. You should be a great ambassador to this college. It is a great college. You should be proud of it and be an ambassador to spread the word about how great this college is. And look for the positive in people. When we look at every one of us has a flaw. And so we can look at people and complain about them, or we can look for the positives, and I share one last story with you. In ancient times, there was a man who had a master, and the master asked him to go down to the water and pick up water every day. And across his back were the poles with 2 jugs. And he went down there every day. And he came back every day. And he did that for a whole year. And one day, the one jug said to him, I feel so bad. You see, I have a crack, and I only give you half the water by the time you arrive at your destination. And the servant said, oh no, you've done much more. Next time you walk down that road and you're coming back, look at all the flowers. You see, you watered the side of the road and gave us flowers. And you give Monmouth College many flowers. Thank you.
Okay, Mary has asked if there'd be to take a few questions here before we break. Does anybody have a question for Mary? How does Mary Kellogg here there? What was your story? Where did you go? How did you get there?
Well, I went to Chicago, as I said, and I worked there. And then I decided after school, and I did not finish, but after school, I had this urge that Johnny Carson talked about Hollywood and Vine. I think I'll go to California. And I drove. I would no more do that today. I drove to California. It took 3 days. I remember I had about $150. It cost $50 to drive across from here, Chicago there. Where am I going to stay? Well, Hollywood and Vine sounds good, so I got a motel room. Now I needed a job. Well, I look in the paper. Oh, there's a job at Bullock's department store in the ad department. I'll go there. So I started as a receptionist, and I knew I could show them that I was more than a receptionist. But I was going to be the best receptionist they ever had. And what I did on Saturdays when nobody was there, I have no idea, but I would go in on Saturdays. Nobody's here. And then they asked me to make coffee. Oh, dear, I've never made coffee before. I think we could save money. It sounded like my dad. Save money if we don't put as much coffee in there. And then one day this copywriter comes in. If you've ever seen Prada, I worked for all those women. And she comes walking in with her fur coat, and she goes, Mary, who made the coffee? She didn't quite say it like that. Well, I said, I did. Well, it tastes like hell. I go, well, so I learned how to make coffee real quick because I realized that the copywriters, the layout artists, and the art directors, if they didn't have their coffee, it was not a good day. So the Scott's coffee, I think we should make that for Titanic, don't you think? So from there, CBS came to me and asked me to join their operation, and they wanted me to be head of sales, or not head of sales, work in sales. And I kept thinking to myself, I'm not a salesperson. Well, I guess I really am. In marketing, you're a salesperson. But it made me better because now that I have all these salespeople working for me, I understand what they have to go through. And then one day we were at CBS, and it was a bad day, and I remember saying to my boss, there's a sleeping giant out in the valley. It's called Disney. Somebody ought to wake that thing up. 6 months later, we got a call to join them. So we worked for 20 years there. So that's kind of the career path I took, you know. Now, it takes 2.5 hours to get down to the Titanic, and they spend 8 hours down there and 2.5 hours back up. So if you think about the distance, it's almost as far as the moon to get down to the Titanic. So John's done that. Everybody always says, well, how do you go to the bathroom? That's what all the little kids ask. They all go, how did you go to the bathroom? He goes, you don't drink anything for 24 hours before you go down there. You know. Students, any questions? You know, you're a very special group in a very special time right now. And I envy that you're at the age that you're at because the world is so wide open. New possibilities, new excitement, new technology. I was telling my father yesterday, I had my cell phone, and I said, I don't need a computer anymore. It's all on my phone. So as we're talking, I can answer the emails. I get about 400 or 500 a day. I can answer those and not come back, and I can't keep up with all of the messages in there. But it's an exciting time for all of you, and I would embrace it with joy and excitement and where you're going to go in life. And the foundation's being built here. And, you know, I often say, you know, I lived in Chicago, I lived in LA, I lived in New York. And I truly believe the heart is in the Midwest. And I truly believe I am a better person having lived in the Midwest. Because you see, when I lived in LA and New York and I asked you how you were, I really didn't care. But I ask you today, and in my heart, I truly care. I truly care about each one of you and how you feel. And that is because we were raised and brought up in the Midwest. And I truly believe the heart of America is here in the Midwest. So, anyway.
For years, it was my job to give out the statue that went to all the Whiteman lectures, but somehow I always forgot, and my office is full of statues that were never delivered. So I'm going to turn that over to Andrew to make sure it happens.
He's going to give me a Disney pass.
Yeah. Well, I first want to thank you very much for coming out, and I would like to congratulate you with our Whiteman Lecture Award.
Thank you very much. It's my honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.